In Washington, D.C., the House Appropriations Committee this week approved its Ag Appropriations bill for the 2017 fiscal year. The bill is $451 million lower than the previous year's and $281 million below President Obama's request. To discuss its contents and learn more about what's next, we talked with Nebraska Extension Public Policy Specialist Brad Lubben Thursday morning.
Well, appropriations is the annual process. Even though a farm bill may have authorized programs through 2018, you still have annual appropriations for those discretionary programs that take money each year to actually run.
What were some of the topics that were the focus this week in D.C.?
We knew and expected this is a House Ag Appropriations bill moving forward, so it covers the ag programs, the Food and Drug Administration, and particularly the implementation of the new food safety rules, and the Commodity Futures Trading Commission. So sort of three agencies that see a funding discussion here. And we knew that there would be more funding for food safety implementation. There's some funding in there for CFTC and its implementation of some new rules as well. But typically it's been a battle over fewer dollars, sort of in keeping with the budget guidelines and the recommendations or the proposals to reduce spending.
And that was the case again this year, yes?
There's always a fight over funding, and that's the case again this year. There are some things that move forward automatically and spend dollars according to what they're authorized. We call those mandatory programs. They spend mandatory money to implement them as they're written. Then there are things called discretionary programs, which are authorized but subject to funding year in and year out. The Appropriations Committee has authority over discretionary programs. They also effectively exert authority over some of the mandatory programs because they'll add riders that reduce the authority to implement a program, or they will reduce the funding for salaries that are necessary to staff the implementation of a program, all to reduce spending or to save money to spend elsewhere. So there's always a fight in D.C.
And of course, if you talk about farm spending, crop insurance always comes to the front, or at least it has over the past few months towards the end of last year and into this year. What's the latest on that?
Well, you're right. As an example, crop insurance is one of those programs that authorized theoretically doesn't show up in appropriations, except there's always a fight over money. And last year there was a fight over funding, a substantial fight over funding that sort of disappeared within 48 hours because of a substantial response from the crop insurance in the agriculture sector. That lesson apparently learned. There's no fight at this point in the House Appropriations version of the funding. Recognize that we're still a long ways from the finish line. There's a Senate version to come. There's a battle over whether this will ever be heard in its own right or whether it gets wrapped up in a bigger omnibus bill that combines all agencies into one. And in fact, that might not even get heard until some lame duck session after the election.
Is conservation again a target?
Conservation is a target as well. Crop insurance is a target because it became big dollars. Conservation is always a target because there's authority to run programs with mandatory dollars, and until they're spent, those dollars look like a bank account that might be used for other things, and conservation almost continually gets robbed year in and year out to help pay for other programs. The working lands programs like EQIP and CSP will suffer a bit again if those projections come to pass.
As you mentioned, this is the House version. Does the Senate version, would you expect that we'll see the same kind of topics discussed?
Perhaps we'll see the same kind of discussion, but there are clearly some decisions and some riders moving forward in the House version that may not survive or may not face the same support in the Senate. So things like a rider to prevent implementation of GIPSA, Grain Inspection, Packers and Stockyards Administration, GIPSA rules on poultry contracting, a rider to provide funding for FDA education on genetically modified technology and the science of it. Those riders may fit now, they may or may not survive the overall fight.